What's your go-to strategy when you're in a place where you don't speak the language?
My strategy is kind of my strategy for life, which is just smile.
There's a way to be a foreigner in a country, to ingratiate yourself.
What about what?
Not chill, that's rude.
You're listening to the British Council English podcast, brought to you by the world's English experts.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for watching our English for Life podcast. Today, we're going to talk about techniques and methods or different ways to say that you don't really understand something and you're asking the person to repeat their sentence or their question. I am here today with Neeraj and Joe. Thank you so
Zina.
much for joining
Everybody.
us.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Today, we're going to talk about your own personal experiences. And the first question is, okay, so what's your go-to strategy when you're in a place where you don't speak the language?
Well, my strategy is kind of my strategy for life, especially if I have any problems, which is just smile a lot.
And not?
Try to be pleasant, try to be helpful. Mm-hmm. I mean, it depends on the situation. If you want to get something in a restaurant, you can always point.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
Okay.
if there's pictures, that's helpful. Using translator, that's really helpful.
Okay. All right.
Or if you're trying to be nice to people and show that you're a nice person, but you can't speak their language, I try to do things for people. Looking for things that I can help them lift, or looking for, ways
Being
that
really
I
physical.
can. Yeah, but not in a slapstick way. But just ways that I can be kind to people without words.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Joe. It depends on the situation. There isn't, I would say for me personally, a single go-to strategy. It really depends. So if I'm let's say, in a longer conversation, or I'm thinking about my situation where I'm in Spain. I mean, I do speak Spanish, but there might be some concepts or things that I don't get. So I just keep listening, and maybe they clarify with a bit more information. I wouldn't interrupt and say, sorry, I don't understand at that moment. I'll let them speak a bit more, see what I can catch. But I remember a time when I went to Japan and I was traveling there, and I don't speak any Japanese, just except for a few words I'd got out the guidebook, and I did the same thing there. And I was surprised by how much I could understand from railway announcements or being in a bar, and I got some of the stuff just by being patient and listening to a bit more.
Really interesting.
Even in Japanese.
Even in Japanese. And I remember I had a meal with an elderly couple sat next to me in a bar, and they bought me a round of drinks. And I don't know how we sat with each other for over an hour, eating and drinking, and I didn't speak Japanese.
Wow. That is amazing. So you basically don't need any techniques to ask someone to repeat the
I don't know what it is. Maybe is this, I exude an energy of you can just talk to me whatever language you want, and he'll kind of get it.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
Lovely. Okay, great. So, can you share a time when you were in a foreign country and totally misunderstood something? And what did you do to get out of that situation?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Well, I've got a situation when I was in my 20s, me and my friend, my first big traveling backpacking adventure, we decided to travel through Europe. And one of our stops was in Poland. And we arrived on the train very early in the morning. We hadn't slept well because we were sleeping on the train with these big, heavy backpacks. And we wanted to get to our hostel. And we had to get a tram from the train station to the hostel. And so we saw a tram just arriving at the station. So we jumped onto it and then realized, oh my God, we hadn't bought any tickets. We couldn't find a ticket machine on the tram, or we remember we didn't see a ticket machine outside at the tram stop. We got on it anyway, and we thought, okay, well, we'll deal with this when we get to the station, or we might be lucky and not have to buy a ticket. As luck would have it, a ticket inspector got on at the very next stop.
Oh, no.
I started asking everyone for their tickets, and we started biting our fingernails, and he stopped when he got to us and started making a big scene. Obviously, we don't speak Polish. And he made us get off the tram and asked us for money. And when we showed him that we didn't have money, we had traveler's checks.
Yeah.
All of this without speaking any Polish. He got frustrated and asked for our passports.
Okay.
And only then did he realize our stories were true, that we were traveling. And we kept explaining to him in English that we were just traveling. We'd come from the UK. after looking at our passports, deliberating for several minutes, I'll let them go.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, we basically had, we did our best in English.
In English.
And he didn't really understand, but he kind of understood from the context that we were traveling. And
All right. Did you try to use any gestures or facial expressions to communicate that with him?
yes. Everything we were explaining was accompanied by gestures, things like no money, ticket, I'm so sorry, that kind of thing,
Okay. All right.
Yes, yeah.
All right.
I mean, we managed to get out of it.
Yay. Yeah, lucky for you. Yes. What about you, Joe?
Well, yeah, I think that happens often when traveling with like directions and things, especially for me because I'm so bad at directions. But I have another story that I was in Egypt last year at one of the markets.
Yeah.
And I'm so bad, like I don't really understand how markets work because when I see something, I'm like, oh my God, look. And my husband is always like, no, you're supposed to pretend you don't want it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, how much is this? Oh, it's 90 euros. Is it really? And then, I was trying to be cool and like, no, I'll walk away. And then, of course, they follow you.
Yeah,
and they're like, you're not leaving the shop without buying something. You love that thing. I don't know why you're leaving. And so I was offered it a little gift.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize you're not supposed to take the gifts. You're shaking your head at me. Like, no. Yeah. I was like, oh my God, thank you so much. But, it's through, I'm speaking English, like your strategy too. I don't know what they understand, but still like just try to communicate in some way.
Okay. All right.
And I took the gift and then I tried to leave. And then he's like, what do you think you're doing leaving? I didn't understand him, but he put his body in the way of the exit. So I was like, okay, clearly nice. I'm not leaving until I buy something. Okay. But, luckily I wasn't a woman on my own because I was there with my husband. So we were able to leave without buying something. And I don't really like that sort of sales tactic. So I didn't buy anything.
A hard sell.
Yeah, I bought something somewhere else.
But so you were speaking in English when you went to Egypt.
Yeah.
And you were using facial expressions and
a combination of facial expressions, body language, anguish, look on my face.
Okay. Now let's just think about our viewers who are watching or listening to this podcast. And let's say that English is their second language. So, and let's say that someone right now, or they're talking to someone and they don't really understand what that person is saying to them and they can't use English perfectly to ask that question or to say, can you please repeat that question? So what are some expressions or what are some sentences that they can use?
In English?
In English, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, asking the person to speak a bit more slowly. This is a technique that I used a lot when I was learning Spanish, when I was recently arrived. And I got into the habit because at first I felt really embarrassed about asking people to speak slowly. I think, well, why should they speak slowly for me? But then I just got into the habit of asking, would you mind saying that? And I always preface it with, I'm sorry, I don't speak very good Spanish. Could you please speak slower? And then they kind of took pity on me and said, okay, well, at least he said that in Spanish, so he's trying. Yeah. And I think that's a key to this is something I said to our colleagues earlier, saying there's a way to be a foreigner in a country, to ingratiate yourself with local people. So if you say that you apologize for not being able to speak their language perfectly, you get a better result.
Absolutely, yes.
I forgot the question.
It's okay. It's so expressions or to use.
What I learned as well, because I have also lived in different countries where I'm learning the language, and one of my top tips is not just to ask them to repeat, but to say from where. Because if you don't say from where, people tend to repeat everything, and this is so nice of them, but it's sometimes like a waste of time. So if I say, I didn't understand the part after, or what did you say about X, so that they can repeat just the relevant part, the part that you didn't understand. And then it eases communication. It's not so, stilted. It's not so hard on the person who's trying to speak to you, or on you who's trying to speak in a different language.
And it also shows them that you're actively listening and you want to understand and you're making the effort, and you did not understand or didn't get that last part. Wonderful. Okay. Next question. Ever mispronounced something in another language and it led to a funny situation? Now, I'm going to start off with my example. I was in Spain and instead of saying buenas noches, I said buenas nachos. And you live in Spain, right? And Neeraj and I think that is not...
Did you get off a nice cold glass of beer afterwards?
No, I just I was just laughed at, but that was okay. And what about you guys?
I guess nachos is just a word that's in your head.
Yeah.
Right? So it just came out
Nachos and
sometimes.
nachos, yeah.
They sound so similar, don't they?
Yeah. My story is kind of similar to that because I was in Italy where I live now and I wanted to order pancakes with maple syrup. Mm-hmm. And the word for syrup in Italian is sciroppo. Mm-hmm. But I'd never said that word before. I only read it on menus. And so instead, a word that I was familiar with came out, which was sciopero, which Italian speakers, if you're listening, will be laughing right now because sciopero means strike, like to go on protest and not work.
Okay.
So I asked for the waiter, the worker at the restaurant, if I could have my pancakes with no work. Basically telling him to go on strike. Like pancakes con sciopero. And he went, okay. And it's like sciopero, sciroppo.
And he left the restaurant.
Yeah, he left the restaurant. I did not get my pancakes. No, I think they're similar enough that he understood. He was like, okay, this is a foreigner. Okay, I'm not going to make her feel bad. So I did get my pancakes, luckily.
Okay.
It's funny, your story was about work because my experience of messing up a word or mangling language was, again, it was Spanish and it was quite early on and I was translating a lot of English directly into Spanish. I think this is what a lot of people do. It's very natural when you're learning a language to translate word for word. And so where I was living, the building, the lift had broken and I was waiting around at the bottom of the lift and the neighbor passed me and he said, what's up? And I said, because in English, when we say something's not working, we use the word work. Whereas in Spanish, they don't use the word work. They use function. Something doesn't function. And so I literally translated, this doesn't work. And he said, yes, because it's a Sunday today. Making a joke, and I just didn't get it at the time. I thought, why is he making jokes with me about this? The lift doesn't work. I'm going to have to climb up 6 floors. Then later it dawned on me, some languages just use a completely different word.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to do like a mini game right now. Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions or say a couple of expressions actually, and you need to decide if it's a rude way to ask someone to say something again or if it's chill and acceptable. Okay. So for example, let's start with, and this is, you can play with us and you can comment. All right. So what about, could you say that again, please?
Very polite.
Polite, acceptable.
Okay.
Acceptable in practically every situation.
Yeah, very polite.
Yeah.
What about, huh?
Not chill.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to say that to people who you don't know. It's a bit rude. It could even be a bit aggressive.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. What about, say that again?
I think it depends, again, on how well you know a person, maybe. But
yeah.
I probably wouldn't say that to many people.
But then why? Because the words say that again. You're asking someone to repeat something. Okay.
Yeah, it's too direct and it's like a command, right? And in English, we generally don't tend to use commands, especially with people we don't know. We tend to use indirect questions or just like, could you say that again, please? Would be the more polite way.
Okay. What about, pardon?
That's something you hear all the time, especially in British English. Pardon. A little bit old-fashioned. I don't use it myself, but...
oh, really? I was going to say I don't use it, but I thought that's because I'm Irish.
Yeah, I think
it's old-fashioned.
I think it's not as common as it once used to be.
Yeah,
it's true.
I certainly don't use it. When I want somebody to repeat, I'd say sorry.
Sorry.
My standard thing, but... it's acceptable and it's very polite. Yeah.
Okay. We have 2 more. What about what?
Not chill. That's rude. Yeah.
I'm always teaching my students about not saying what, because they translate directly from Spanish where the word is acceptable to get somebody to repeat, or como, and they think it's what. And I have to keep telling them, you'd only say that if you're very close to the person, you know them very well, family member or a close friend, and you say, what? What did you say?
Exactly, yeah.
It's short for what did you say, what? But with somebody you don't know, or maybe somebody who you should give some respect to, like a teacher or a boss, you wouldn't use the word what.
Isn't this really interesting though? Because we know these rules. These you can't find these rules in a certain book. Maybe you can find them online. Of course, you can find them online. But it's the fact that we know that it's impolite to say what or huh.
Cultural information, isn't it?
Exactly.
These rules are unwritten rules of cultural communication.
Yeah, because if you're learning a language and it's say that again, then you should be able to say it and have the person repeat themselves, but it's not really polite.
So why do people get it into their minds that it's acceptable to say what? Because we often hear learners saying what inappropriately, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, in your experience.
Also,
have the same?
it's the same with Italian. They say cosa, but it's just like what as well. So they would automatically say what.
Do you think they're translating, or maybe they've seen it or heard it in some other place in English and they're using
I think
that experience?
They're using something that's more similar to their first language. But also, I don't know, I may be wrong, but I feel like you see it in films. Maybe it's a more
and maybe
American
social media
thing.
as well has an impact there.
Perhaps.
They're seeing the usage of what on TikTok and media where the kind of style of talking is very personal.
Yeah.
One more. Sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat it?
Very good.
Love it.
Yeah.
Nice. It's elegant.
Yeah, use that one.
Okay. Do you have any other expressions that our viewers or listeners can use? So we did. Can you say that again, please?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed it. Anything else? Oh, what about? Excuse me. Could you repeat that? Do you like that one?
You could say that, but I don't know how often I would actually say that. Could you repeat that, the whole phrase, I'd say?
So it's not really natural or very natural to say?
It's quite formal. Yeah. Would you mind saying that again? Again, it's a bit more formal. But I have used it in the past. Would you mind saying that again? Maybe over the telephone?
Maybe, what was that last bit again?
Yeah.
That is really nice. Yes, exactly. And there's also another technique that we were talking about, Neeraj, off camera.
Where you recap what you've understood.
Yeah.
Okay, so you interject at the correct moment. If somebody's telling you a long story and you want to check that you've understood before they go on a bit more, and so you just say, so if I understood correctly, and then you tell them the main details, a bit of summary of what they've said, just to get confirmation from them that you've understood the key details. I use that a lot when I'm following a long story in Spanish.
And it's also a great way to show that you're listening actively again.
Participating in the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Neeraj. Thank you, Joe, for being a part of today's
Pleasure.
podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, our viewers, for tuning in and for watching this podcast. If you're watching it on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and we have lots of new content coming out every week or so. So make sure you subscribe to watch all of it. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. We really care about your English, so if you like this episode, make sure you subscribe because we've got lots more great content for you to explore.